Karma here with your July Astrology cheat codes. If you are here, you recognize that we are astrologically influenced by the planets and stars. And with that understanding of how the energy influences us, we can better navigate life's obstacles. So welcome to the club, and let's take an overall look at what happens in July. All right, so in July, we have several planets going into retrograde. We have Neptune, Saturn going into retrograde in the realm of Aries and will retrograde back to Pisces. We have Mercury going into retrograde in the realm of Leo. We have Venus transitioning into both Cancer and Gemini. We have a Capricorn full moon, and we have a Leo new moon. And additionally, Uranus crosses into Gemini. So there's a lot happening in this month, especially with this retrograde energy, because many of these things are aspecting back to Neptune and Saturn. So there's an emphasis here on lessons, okay? And when Saturn hits retrograde, it can become like a pretty ugly energy. Saturn retrograde energy can sometimes be a little funky, okay? Because Saturn is the planet of karma. Saturn is also the planet of lessons, right? So as it goes into retrograde, it makes you retrospective of the lessons that you need to learn. And sometimes that can be kind of hard. That's a hard energy, okay? That's a hard energy to navigate. So, Saturn is going to be in retrograde for a minute. All right. So this is just the beginning, but it will cross back into Pisces, so it won't be as active in that Aries energy, but nonetheless, still lessons on lessons, okay? Lessons on lessons. All right, so I'm not going to go into deep analysis of each individual transit. I will give you the energy of the transit as it is transitioning into whatever is happening. However, I will create separate videos for all of the things that are happening in July so that we can get a more deep dive look at what it is everyone is supposed to be working on. But this will just be a summary of what's going on in July. So let's talk about the signs. If you are looking at this from the perspective of your rising sign, okay, this will be most accurate for your rising sign. This is because it encompasses your horizon of your life, okay? Your rising sign, your ascendant sign, the horizon of your life. This encompasses everything, okay? If you're looking at this from your sun perspective, your sun sign, this will be in relation to your ego, your attention, your focus, okay? If you are looking at this from your moon sign, this will be in relation to your emotions, your instincts, and your intuition. Okay, so with that, let's jump into the individuals. Sagittarius. Okay, so overall in July, what is going to be happening for you is there's going to be some retrogrades in your 5th house where Neptune and Saturn are sitting. This is your house of Aries. And then you also have retrograde activity in your 9th house where Mercury is sitting. And that is your house of Leo. Okay, so those are two fire houses, right? So this is about the actions that you take, how it is you express yourself, your pride, your ego, right? These are opportunities that come back around for you to repair, restructure energy that relates to that. This is like pulling on things that maybe have already happened in your life that give you the opportunity to like really see yourself from a different perspective and change your behaviors. Okay. And then also we have a new moon happening in that 9th house of Leo as well. We have the sun crossing into that 9th house of Leo. Okay. And then we also have Uranus crossing into the 7th house of Gemini for you. Okay. So there's some sort of change. Now the 5th house, the 9th house, the 7th house are emphasis on your relationships, right? This is your self-expression in your relationships. The fifth house represents your short-term dating, okay? The seventh house represents your long-term connections, bonds, marriage, right? Your ninth house represents exploration and discovery as well. And that can also bring a second life partner. Okay. So there's heavy emphasis for some people here as it relates to relationships. So with that retrograde happening in your fifth and your ninth house, this is like your dating, your exploration, your entertainment, what it is that you do, discovery around that, and themes that will support better movement for you, right, within that realm of life. So if you see things happening, we have, again, Neptune and Saturn that are going into retrograde and will be in retrograde for the rest of the year. Okay, Pluto is already in retrograde. Mercury is going to go into retrograde briefly in that ninth house. So again, there is emphasis here with the fifth house of your self-expression and entertainment. There's emphasis here on the seventh house of your long-term bonds, your deep connection, your business partnerships. And then there's also emphasis here on your ninth house, which is your house of discovery, exploration. That's vacations, long-term travel, second life partner, spirituality, religion, law, ethics, okay, your worldview, your ideologies. There are retrograde, reflection, restructure, repair. There are energies that are coming back, especially in the month of July as we enter into those first moments of retrograde. Energy that comes back that has you contemplating on your behaviors and how it is that you act so that you can come back and like self-reflect. Okay, Sagittarius? All right, so let's jump into the actual dates of all of this. On July 4th, Venus enters Gemini. Okay, Venus enters Gemini, which is your seventh house. Okay, and that seventh house is sextile to the fifth house. So I'm gonna just be real upfront. You got the fifth house, the seventh house, the ninth house, and then I think the third house will come into play here. Third house, where Pluto sits, your house of Aquarius, right? So you have 3, 5, 7, and 9. That is heavy hitters for the month of July. Okay, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Heavy hitters for the month of July, changing your perspective. So as Venus enters into that seventh house, right? On the same day, Neptune is going in retrograde. We'll cover that in a second. But let's talk about Venus. Venus represents love, beauty, abundance, art, creativity. These are your relationships, your partnerships, peace and harmony, right? So with Venus being in Gemini, there is an emphasis here on you being flexible or you being curious around those creative opportunities. And this is within your seventh house, your partnerships, your long-term bonds. This could be marriage. This could be a long-term relationship. This could be a long-term friendship for you. This could be a business partnership. And with that sextile energy back to that fifth house of Aries, where Saturn and Neptune are sitting, right? Saturn is the planet of karma, the efforts you put in, the results you get back. And Neptune is the planet of the hidden. How your imagination plays a part in how you maneuver through life. This is your self-destructive ways, your illusions, your delusions. This is your fantasies and your desires. This is escapism. Oh, I see a dragonfly. I gotta look up what that means. But your spirituality, your spiritual strength, right? This is your subconscious, right? So with this sextile energy between that seventh and that fifth house, Venus will be entering into the first degrees, around the fourth, and Saturn and Neptune are in those first degrees. Uranus will soon cross into Gemini as well and be in those first degrees. So there's heavy emphasis between that fifth and that seventh house. How this could be how you date, the things that you do within your dating life, your entertainment, your how you find pleasure, how you find entertainment, how you express yourself, right? That fifth house within your partnerships, right? So this is a flexibility around your perspective, your mind, your logic, your communication, what it is that you are doing as it relates to your long-term bonds, and how to make peace there with that Venus energy. And again, as I said before, Neptune goes into retrograde in that fifth house, right? So Neptune which is, 1 degree away from Saturn, which will go into retrograde 11 days later, which we also will talk about. Neptune is the hidden. It's your subconscious mind. It's your dreams, illusions, delusions, right? So there's an emphasis here on the actions that you take, right, within your self-expression, your creativity, those self-sabotaging habits, or the actions that you take when you're under illusion, or when you are being delusional, right? Being impulsive because of it. This retrograde energy, if we talk about retrograde, is restructure, reflection, repair, right? That's what retrograde brings for you. And typically that's what I say, retrograde brings back the past. It's because retrograde turns the energy inward, and it makes us look at ourselves and how we've acted before, and whether that's something we want to continue doing, or seeing the results of how you acted before and how it's popping up now in this retrograde. Do you still want to continue to act that way? You get clarity sometimes to show you that maybe the way that you were acting, you should not have acted that way, right? So there's an emphasis here that Neptune in that 5th house, the self-sabotage within your self-expression. Neptune goes into retrograde, you have opportunities there to reflect on that. And we'll continue to keep talking about that over and over again, okay? All right, so then up next on July 7th, Uranus enters Gemini, okay? So on July 7th, Uranus goes into your 7th house. And again, that is where your long-term bonds, your deep connections, marriage, partnerships lie, right? And this is Gemini energy. So this is the flexibility of your mind. This is your curiosity. This is your imagination. This also may be like, as it relates to the shallowness you might have, like the inflexibility that you may have as it relates to your thought process and your long-term bonds, okay? And remember, the 7th house is still sextile to that 5th house, right? Again, there's sextile activity from the 3rd house with Pluto in those first degrees to the 5th house with Neptune and Saturn in those first degrees, to the 7th house where Uranus is now in the first degrees, right? To the 9th house where, once we get to these dates, the sun, the new moon, and Mercury will be sitting, okay? On July 10th, we have a full moon in Capricorn, and this is going to be in your 2nd house. So there's something here that happened earlier in the year. This would have been the later part of January, where there was something that popped, and maybe you didn't notice it because this is a new moon. And the way that I like to think about the moon cycle is, the new moon, there's a little sliver of a moon. So you can't really see too much at night. The nights are pretty dark, right? But nonetheless, there are still things there. And then you think about the new moon. The new moon is the nights in which you can see the most, right? Because there is more light from that moon illuminated by the sun, right? So this Capricorn full moon sheds more light on something that was happening in the later part of January for you. And this is around your material value. This is your 2nd house, right? So this is like your focus on what it is that you want, what it is that you desire. This could be your self-worth, your possessions, your finances, your lending and borrowing, your appetite. This could be appetite for food. This could be appetite for sex, right? So there's an emphasis here on you could be bitter about something, you could be very disciplined or focused on something specific that you want to gain, right? This Capricorn full moon will come in and shed some light on that for you, okay? Then on July 13th, we have Saturn popping into retrograde in the 5th house. Again, now it's 1 degree from Neptune, so both Neptune and Saturn are in retrograde in that 5th house, okay? And that 5th house is sextile to that 3rd house where Pluto is sitting. So overall, Sagittarius, Pluto is really what we're talking about. Pluto is going to be in the 3rd house until 2040 something, okay? And Pluto represents an overall structural change in our life, a transformation, out with the old, in with the new, as it relates to your mind, your perspective, your focus, right? So this is your house of Aquarius, a change in your mind, a change in how you process things, a change in your perspective, right? So there's emphasis here. Pluto has been in Aquarius Aquarius for a little minute. It's been popping in and out of Aquarius from Capricorn for a couple years, and this year Pluto is fully in Aquarius. This is first year that Pluto is fully in Aquarius, and I think it's at like the 2nd degree, and it is also in retrograde. So this sextile energy, right, between Saturn and Neptune to Pluto, all 3 planets are in retrograde. So there's heavy emphasis on your actions and your behaviors from the past coming back towards you to better help you understand how you can adjust your behaviors. Okay, so with Saturn, which is the planet, the teaching planet, the teacher, right? Saturn is here to teach us lessons, right? Saturn is the planet that rules over karma, the efforts you put in and the results that you get back because of it, right? So with Neptune, your hidden self-destructive ways, illusions, delusions, your imagination and subconscious. Saturn, the teacher, right? Karma, your efforts versus, you know, the results that you get from that are sextile to your 3rd house of your mind, right? Your perspective, your focus, what it is you think, how it is you process, what it is that you communicate, right? So this is heavy, heavy, heavy retrograde energy. And you're going to see themes from the past, energy from the past bubble and pop back up to help you further develop your internal self, okay? Then on July 18th, Mercury goes into retrograde, the 4th planet that's in retrograde. Okay, and it goes into retrograde in your 9th house. So that's your 9th house of discovery. So now we have the tail end of July is 9th house, 9th house, 9th house, 9th house, 9th house, 9th house. Okay, that 9th house is going to be a heavy hitter for the last parts of July. Okay, so with Mercury in retrograde in that 9th house, right, it is sextile to the 7th house, because remember again, sextile activity, sextile from Pluto to the 5th house of, I keep wanting to say Uranus, Neptune and Saturn to that 7th house where Uranus sits to that 9th house, right? Now, Mercury will have well past those 1st degrees. Mercury, I think, is going to be in the later part of Leo. Nonetheless, it hits retrograde. And it starts to make its way backwards or appear to make its way backwards in that 9th house. So that 9th house is your house, also another house of discovery, but this is your ideology and worldview. This is your total view of the world. This is where your ethics lie. This is your spirituality, your religion. This is long distance travel. This is a second life partner, right? So there's heavy emphasis, right, with Mercury in retrograde. It is still causing that sextile energy back to that 7th house, which is linked to the 5th house, which is linked to the 3rd house, right? So there's heavy emphasis here on the courage that you have, the things that you do, maybe even how you operate within your pride or ego around discovery or exploration or creating something within this 9th house energy of discovery and exploration, okay? July 22nd, the sun enters Leo. Okay, so this again is that 9th house energy. The sun will be in the 1st degrees of Leo. The sun will be at 0 degrees, 0 minutes, right? So the sun enters Leo. And again, that is where we start to have that sextile energy, right? Because Mercury will have passed the 1st degrees of Leo once it pops into retrograde. But the sun hits retrograde. The sun hits Leo in that 9th house, right? And it then creates that sextile, right? The sun, then it moves 1 degree per day. So, you know, by July 23rd, it is in an exact sextile to, you know, Saturn, or I can't remember which one is first. I think it is Saturn that is past Neptune. So it'll reach Neptune first with the sextile, then it'll reach the next day, it'll likely the 24th, it'll reach a sextile with Saturn, right? But it's nonetheless sextile energy to that 7th house, right? So this is your deep bond. So this is where I say, Sagittarius, this for you might be like heavy emphasis on relationships and how you think about relationships, your perspective of relationships, your curiosity, flexibility in mind around your relationships, and the bonds that you choose to discover. Because the 3rd house is the house of mind. The 5th house is the house of self-expression, the house of dating as well, entertainment, short-term dates, right? Think of it, short-term sex, like, you know, like just, you know, somebody you meet off of an online dating site. Think of it like that. Then you have that 7th house, which is sextile to the 5th house. This is your long-term relationships. These are your best friends in the whole wide world. You've been friends forever. This is, you know, your husband or your wife or your spouse, your partner, right? This is a long-term relationship, something that you've been in for a very long time. This is your business relationships as well, things that you expect to be in for a long time. So there is emphasis here, right, for you Sagittarius, when the sun enters Leo in that 9th house. This is like creation of something. Somebody might find a second life partner. Somebody here might start a business as it relates to travel. Somebody here may find a new set of spiritual, you know, spiritual things to follow, or might fall into religion, right? Somebody might change their worldview or their ideology or their ethics, right? So there's an emphasis here on a change in mind, in perspective, as it relates to self-expression, the relationships that you create, and the discovery of that. Okay. Now, a couple days later, right, we have a new moon in Leo. So on July 24th, we have a new moon in Leo. So again, another thing in Leo. Now we have Mercury that is in retrograde in that 9th house. We have the sun in the 1st degrees in that 9th house. And then we have the new moon in Leo, which is going to be sitting between Mercury in retrograde and the sun in the 1st degrees, creating a sextile to those other houses, right? So here, this is where we start a new cycle. Okay, the new moon is, you know, a slither of a moon in the sky. If we think about this figuratively, if we think about night, when we look at the sky, the moon is a little sliver. You can't really see much, right? The moon doesn't illuminate too much when you are at a new moon because it's a little tiny sliver. The sun is only illuminating a very small portion of the moon, right? When you get to the new moon, which will happen in 2026 for this when you get to the full moon, right, which will happen in 2026, the Leo full moon, right, that is where you see the most. If we think about night again, it's like the moon is fully illuminated by the sun, all right, because it's sitting directly across from the sun, whereas right now it's sitting beside the sun. So only the side of the moon is illuminated. When the moon is sitting across from the sun, the whole moon is illuminated. So now you get to see what's really going on behind the scenes, what's really going on in the nighttime at dark, right? So this is figuratively in our lives. That's how it works, right? So there's something here. You kind of come close in proximity to something in this new moon, and over the 6-month moon cycle, the energy develops. And once you get to that full moon, right, you get to see the results of what has been developing over the 6 months. So we are starting something right now in this 9th house, and this is exploration and discovery. Okay, so this is something that is going to be developed over the next 6 months, right? And then you get to, you know, the beginning of 2026, and it's like, surprise, look at this brand new energy. You didn't know it looked like that, did you? Right? It's that type of energy. Okay. So now we have this new moon in Leo. Okay. In the 9th house, which is discovery, exploration. I'm not going to repeat that. Right. Then we have the 9th house, which is sextile to your 7th house, your house of long-term partnerships and your deep bonds. Right. And then that 9th house is also trine to that 5th house, right? Your 5th house of self-expression and creativity, right? So this is where all of that 3, 5, 7, 9. Then, you know, you got the 5th house sextile to the 3rd house. You have the 7th house trine to the. So again, heavy emphasis on changing of your perspective and what it is you discover, changing of maybe your ethics or your ideology around your relationships, around your bonds, around what it is that you commit to. Okay. And then last but not least, we have Venus entering Cancer on the 31st. Okay. So that is where the square energy comes from. Okay, that is, we've been talking about sextiles and trines. Opportunities is what sextile represents. Trines is just a very easy flow of energy. It means that signs are in the same the same element, right? So it's a water and water. That's trine energy. Sextile energy is compatible energies. It creates opportunities, right? Doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It just creates opportunities. Then you have the square energy, right? That is opposing energy. So you have fire and water, air and earth. Those don't really mesh. That's where you get that square energy from, because it's like oil and water. You can't really mix them up too well. Like, you could try really hard, but yeah, it's oil and water, right? So this is where we start to feel frustrations. We might feel tension, all right? And this energy is between Saturn, which is in retrograde, Saturn and Neptune, which is in retrograde in that 5th house of self-expression, and then Venus in Cancer, right? So with Venus being in Cancer, right, Venus represents love, beauty, abundance, peace and harmony, your relationships, your partnerships, your creativity, all that good stuff, right? So that being in the 8th house of transitions, this is a transformation that's happening behind the scenes. There are opportunities to nurture something. There's opportunities to create something here that will help with ease of transition, or help with harmony within the ease of some sort of transition. But these are about your habits, your impulsive behaviors within that 5th house, right? The things that you do within self-expression that kind of may not necessarily work too well with how Venus is trying to track through that 8th house and create peace and harmony within some sort of transition. Okay, so you're going to feel the pull of energy. Now, Venus moves relatively quickly. Venus is an inner planet, so it's something that, it won't stay there like Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Pluto. Those gonna be there for a minute. Venus, this will be a, couple months, a couple weeks of energy, and Venus is going to go on about her business, okay? Because Venus started in Gemini at the beginning of July, okay? So again, at the end of the month, into August, you may feel a little frustrations or tension around some sort of transition. Just try to do your best to pull on tools that maybe are unique to you. Maybe try to think outside of the box, right? Try to be a little bit more perceptive instead of acting, right? But overall, in July, Sagittarius, there's emphasis, as I said before, on you changing with that Pluto energy in that 3rd house. Is a change of perspective. It's a change of your focus. It's a change on how you communicate what it is that you do. But that Pluto energy is what is helping, or let me rephrase what I'm saying. The energy that we see in July is what's helping that Pluto energy, that change in perspective, right? So again, with these retrogrades happening with Neptune, Saturn, and Mercury, there are opportunities for us to really focus or restructure, because retrograde represents restructure, repair, reflection. So July is a month where we get to deal with things from the past and, fix our own energy within ourselves. Okay, Sagittarius, I'm with you. I'm a Sagittarius rising, so I feel like I already know what this is for me. You see me rolling my eyes, right? I already know what this is for me. So I hope that this reaches you well, because it don't reach me well. Okay, bye, Sagittarius.